So today I'm going to give you some tips and a pretty comprehensive framework on how you can spice up your chord progressions a bit, much in the style of Jimi Hendrix. That's where this all kind of originates, but you hear loads of players do it, whether that's Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer, Mateus Asato, to name a few. It's a great way to make your rhythm guitar sound more interesting, and it's just a really fun thing to do and kind of cycle through chord progressions, adding little leads and licks here and there. So it's definitely something you're going to want to add to your repertoire. First of all, there is a link to the PDF that's available for free. It's in the description below, so make sure to grab that. And one more thing, you need to be familiar with your 4 basic bar chord shapes. That's the major and minor bar chord shapes on the E and the A string to do this lesson. If you don't know how to do that, I'll leave a link to a video where I go over that in the description that you can check out and then come back to this one. The other thing is that it'll be helpful if you know all your 5 pentatonic shapes, but it's not necessary. You can kind of just learn this on the fly with this video. So the first thing we're going to do is go through all our bar chord shapes and then find the pentatonic scale shape that surrounds that bar chord shape. So if we look at the first diagram, our red notes, they're all the fundamental bar chord shape, which in the case of this one is just your E major bar chord, and it's starting on an A note on the E string, so this would be A major. But all this stuff is movable, you don't have to start it on the 5th fret. So after we've played our E major bar chord shape, we can look at the green squares, and those are all the scale notes that surround that bar chord shape. And you'll notice that there's a few of them that double up in the same fret because the chord and the scale share a few tones. Okay, so if I play this, I can play this green note here, here, back here. These are all notes that would belong with that chord. And this is pattern 2 of the pentatonic scale, or the major pentatonic scale, if you're familiar with that. So I can play this chord, and then these green notes are scale tones I can choose from. Cool? So if I play through that a bit, I have my A chord, or E major bar chord shape, then I can right, I'm kind of playing the chord and then playing a little lick in between with the green notes. And just to show you an example, if I needed to do this on a B major chord, I would find a B note on my E string, right, 7th fret, play my major bar chord shape there, and then all these scale notes still fall into the same place relative to the bar chord. Alright, moving on to the second diagram. So it's the exact same idea, but for our major bar chord shape on the A string. This is often known as an A bar chord shape. So this one here, so I'm starting on the 5th fret, that's my root note on the A string, so this would be a D major bar chord. Now the pentatonic shape that surrounds that would be pattern 5. So if I start here, I have my root note here, I can work back down, play these notes, work my way up. These notes are all going to belong to that D major chord. So if I alternate between the two a bit, so now we have our major bar chords on the E and the A string, and we have our surrounding scale tones or pentatonic shapes that fit with them. So something you can do to practice this is just play a 1-4 chord progression. For example, A major to D major, and try add in some fills using these pentatonic notes. So I could go. Not my best playing, but you get the idea. Now moving on, we're going to look at our minor chord shapes and what scale tones surround them. So first off, let's take our E minor bar chord shape, starting on the 5th fret. Now this is a pretty easy one. The surrounding scale tones are just pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. Which if you've been doing any kind of improvising, you're probably very familiar with. So again, start off, just play the chord, then do some licks using pattern 1. Now next up is our minor bar chord shape, but with the root notes starting on the A string. So this would be known as our A minor bar chord shape. If I started on the D note on the A string, that gives me a D minor chord. Now the notes surrounding that are pattern 4 of the minor pentatonic scale. So if I play my minor bar chord, I can play pattern 4 of the minor pentatonic scale, and that'll give me some cool surrounding tones. So again, I'll alternate between that chord and play some licks using pattern 4. So that's how that one works. Now you have a pretty good framework to work with. Okay, we've got major shapes on the E and the A string. We've got minor shapes on the E and the A string. And we have the surrounding scale tones that we can use. So a really good idea is just take a simple chord progression like the one I played at the beginning. It was just a 1, 5, 6, 4 that you've probably heard a million times. And I was playing it in the key of D. So the root chords were a D major, and I was playing that on the A string, and then A major on the E string, B minor on the E string, and G major on the E string. Okay, so I'd play my first chord, my D major, and I know that the surrounding notes, if I'm playing my major chord on the A string at pattern 5, so I can play through that a bit. And then I play my A major bar chord, and I know the surrounding notes for that at pattern 2 of the pentatonic, then B minor on the E string, so I know I can just play pattern 1. Then again another bar chord on the E string, so I play my pattern 2, and then go back to my 1. Cool, so experiment with that for a bit and get familiar with it, because we're going to add on even more. And this is where the magic really happens and you get the Hendrixy kind of sound. So we're going to learn inversions. Inversions are just the same notes of a chord, just in a different order with a different bass note. So if we look at the diagram, the blue hexagon notes, they are our inversion notes. So if I were to play a major bar chord on the A string using our A shape, if I wanted to invert that, what I do, I actually put my first finger where those 3 red notes in the row are, and I bar like that, and then I use my third finger to play this 9th fret. And this would be in my inverted shape, like this. Cool, so if I had D major here, I move across like this, and this is also D major, just in first inversion. So just with that, whenever I'm playing a bar chord on the A string, I can now invert it, like that, and get a bit more movement. So if I was going just from D to A, instead of just going D, A, I could go D, invert it, A. So already that's something to work with. Now the next step is something very practical that I use a lot, is that if we play our major bar chord on the A string, and then we invert it, if we play pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale around that area that we are playing that chord inversion, we can actually just use pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale as our fill-in scale tones. And that's really useful because anyone with any kind of experience improvising knows that pattern 1 is probably the most ergonomic shape you can play on guitar. So now what I can do is I can play my D chord, my major bar chord, invert it, play my pattern 1. Root bar chord, invert, pattern 1. So that's really fun, and that's something you're definitely going to work on and want to play with a bit. And again, this works anywhere on the guitar where you're playing your major bar chord on the A string. Everything just moves relative. So the next step is we're going to learn how to invert our major chords on the E string. So if I play my major bar chord or E shape on the E string again, okay, so A major, to invert that chord, exact same idea, I just go across 3 frets and play the exact same shape. Except now, I'm only covering 2 strings with my first finger rather than 3. Playing the 9th fret on the E, the 7th on the A, and 7th on the D. Cool, so root shape, and then across, inversion. If I did that on C, here's my C chord, move across, invert that. Okay, it works anywhere. Now, our surrounding scale tones for this inversion shape would be pattern 3 of the pentatonic scale. So if I wanted to, I could play my A major bar chord, slide across to the inversion. If I wanted to play a lick, I would use pattern 3 of the pentatonic. Cool, so in context a little bit. Cool, you get the idea. So now we know how to invert our major chords on the E and the A string and the surrounding scale tones of that inverted shape. Hopefully you're following along because I know it's getting a bit complicated. Now I should add, there's also a blog post on my website about this, so if you want to read over it, if you find that helps you learn a bit better, then check that out too. And again, it's all free. Now in terms of minor chords, I tend to find the first inversion of those doesn't sound as great. This is what it sounds like if you want to hear it. So I have my minor root chord here, and then the inversion here. It's cool, but I just don't find it's as usable. However, there is another method I like to use, and you hear a lot of players do this to embellish those minor chords and get a bit more movement, and that's wrapping the horizontal pentatonic shapes around that root chord. So if I play my minor bar chord on the A string, I've written out in the green dots the whole horizontal pentatonic scale that surrounds that. So I can go back here, slide up with the blue arrows, and end up here. And that's pretty usable. So, you know, if I play my minor bar chord, right, using that horizontal pentatonic scale gives me more range and it can help you create a bit more movement. Now for the A string, similar idea. I've written out the horizontal pentatonic shape notes that surround that minor bar chord on the A string, that A minor shape. So if we played a D minor bar chord with our A minor shape, I have all these notes. So I have all those notes around there I can use to do little fills if I'm playing that chord. So now we've got our major bar chords on the E and the A string, surrounding scale tones and inversions of them. And we've got our minor bar chords on the E and A string, and we have the pentatonic shape that surrounds them, as well as the horizontal shapes if we want even more range and even more movement. And once you really learn this stuff and practice it, becomes second nature, and you can apply all of it to your chord progressions to get more movement and get that cool Jimi Hendrix sound. So I'll do a demo run through of that chord progression I did at the beginning, and I'll let you know what I'm playing and what I'm thinking, just so you get an idea of how this all sounds. So the chord progression I'm going to use is just D major, so the major bar chord on the A string, A major on the E string, B minor on the E string, and G major on the E string. So what I could do is play my first chord, invert that, then play pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. Then I can go to my A chord on the E string. Now if I wanted, I could just go pattern 2 of the pentatonic scale, or I could invert that. And then that will put me into pattern 3 of the pentatonic scale. And then I can go straight to my B minor chord. And then around here, I could use my horizontal pentatonic shape. Then I could go to my G major chord on the E string, and again, I could just play pattern 2. Sounds cool. Or I could invert it and use pattern 3. Then back to my 1 chord. Okay, now I'll put this all together and just play a bit more rhythmically. Okay, a bit busier than I would normally play, but I was trying to show you examples of all the things we've done. So hopefully that made sense and it was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions below in the comments and I'll get back to you. And don't forget to download the PDF, the link's in the description. But otherwise, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.